All right, welcome in everybody to your favorite post-game podcast about the Utah Jazz that also talks about beer sometimes. Actually, a lot of the time. I'm Mark Pereira. Happy to have you here on a win for the Jazz. Got a simple beer here for you today. I had a more complex beer earlier, but then I finished it, so I can't lie on this dear postcast that I care about so dearly. So we're going to be accurate with the beer we're drinking. Just drinking a simple Breckenridge Brewery Vanilla Porter, 5.5%. You'll find these vanilla porters pretty much nationwide at this point. They're fine. I don't think they're the best port in the world. Honestly, if you're gonna get a cheap porter, I think you could do a lot worse than this. But I was getting cheap porters in Philly. I used to get the old Yangling porters for like $8 for a 6-pack or $9 for a 6-pack, and that's what first got me into porters. Is like because I never liked stouts in college and law school. There's something about the mouthfeel I just didn't really appreciate. And then my first porter was a Yangling porter in law school, and that kind of turned me on to like, oh, you can have a darker beer that has a good caramel amber flavor to it. So we're drinking this vanilla porter today. It's a simple one. I don't think it's as hyped up as it is, but hey, it's a good Thursday night beer for you guys. I'm excited. We got 49 points for Lauri Markkanen today. So, and I know that I keep exclaiming that this season is not about wins and losses for the Utah Jazz in either direction, wins or losses. But it is more fun to talk about the Jazz when we have a good win to celebrate. We got Andy Larson in the chat saying, it's a good beer. Hey, I'm going to give it a C-. It's okay. And C is average, right, in this world today. So let's see here. We got some fun things to talk about. So make sure all our broadcasts are up here. So this I'm trying to think of other flavored porters we've had that are pretty good. I think it's more like lately I've been more into the barrel-aged porters, and I think it's kind of clouded my opinion of some of these porters we've had recently. But you get these nationwide. I think they're pretty good. So let's talk about the Jazz today. Thank you all for joining in on Spaces or YouTube. This is for Salt City Hoops. You can check out our work at saltcityhoops.com. Friend of the program, Dan Clayton, you'll see him writing his weekly post. I'll be writing a post this week on halfway mark grades for the Jazz. The Jazz, after 41 games, set a game under 500. As I confirmed that beforehand, and I still got to look it up. Yeah, 19 and 21 going into today. So we got 20 and 21 going into the halfway mark. And I tell you what, man, we're almost all the way to the 24.5 Vegas spread, or over-under, preseason. 25.5 in some places. This team's definitely going to win more than 25. And like the Indiana Pacers, I think this is a good lesson in over-under betting. I think before the season is like, if you're predicting a team to be really bad based on any possible future transactions that you're pretty sure you're going to make, you have to bump up 5 or 6 wins, because sometimes those players are going to play some games in October, November, December. And we talk about the various December timelines when players become more eligible to be traded, especially recent acquisitions or especially recent trade acquisitions. These if their players are good, they're going to play, and if there's a good coaching situation in hand, as you do in Indiana with Rick Carlisle and in Utah with Will Hardy, who is admittedly a question mark, but I think Will Hardy was, given the hype, was a little bit more on the positive end of, okay, this might be something that works out. But Utah probably, they had the talent as well. They had a starting roster you could put out there. They're definitely going to blow past that over-under. I think it's a good lesson for us bettors going into next offseason. But that's probably the fourth thing we should talk about. I'm all out of sorts over Andy Larson telling me that Vanilla Porter is a good beer. It's a C-. It's okay. Andy, you got to check out some of the beers we got going on for other nights. I was just drinking a vanilla and cinnamon barrel aged stout that clocks in at 9.5%. I wish I still had it going. Lauri Markkanen, career high 49 points today, and it's pointed out frequently that, especially by me, that he is not exactly doing the playmaking usage type of stuff that you would expect out of star players. Seth Partnow, a longtime statistician who blogs about the NBA and such, he's commented frequently, or he in his proprietary stats show that Lauri Markkanen has a very, very, very small usage percentage when it comes to in like a playmaking category, right? Like initiating off the pick and roll or an isolation type of possessions. And as you watch the highlight reel on Twitter or Instagram or wherever you're watching Utah Jazz highlights of Markkanen's performance today, there's a couple of situations where you have Markkanen taking a couple dribbles, of course, or shooting a contested shot, or needing to make a decision off of these things, but they're always coming off of passes, right? There's never a possession where Markkanen is getting the ball at the top of the key at the start of a possession and making a decision off of that. You never have possessions where Markkanen is getting the ball dumped into him in the post and turning that into like an isolation qualified possession. You're always getting Lauri Markkanen on the move, right? You're always getting Lauri Markkanen either with the ball or without the ball, where he's not the one who is the one dribbling the basketball, making that guard level playmaking level decision. And I think I've called that a flaw in his game as we've watched him ascend this year. And what's fun about the counter argument to that is he is very firmly entrenched in just half a season as one of the NBA's premier secondary players, right? And those types of players make boatloads of all-star games, right? The preeminent player of our generation in this situation is Klay Thompson, right? Klay Thompson is notable for having 40-point games with only having 10 dribbles, 12 dribbles, or something like that. It is an extremely useful, and useful is so underselling it. It's valuable. It is worth tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in the current NBA salary structure to be a player that can play at that high of an efficiency level, shooting the basketball at all three levels, right? Markkanen's mid-range game is something I want to make sure to tap into a little bit later. That is so valuable for a championship building team. So if Markkanen, thankfully we have him under contract for a more affordable rates for the next couple of years. But if you were to say Markkanen needs to get $40 million a year, right? Probably likely $40 million a year starting this summer. You're not looking at that as, oh shit, we've hamstrung our team building operation, right? Sometimes if you give that type of money to a player who can't be your number one option as the primary facilitator, primary playmaker for a team, you end up in a little bit of trouble with how you can acquire players around him. Can you get that primary facilitator? Do you have the money for it? Are you paying too much money to Rudy Gay? Are you paying too much money to other players on your roster? Sorry, Rudy Gay has to take a drive-by on every single postcast of mine. His plus-minus be damned. But if someone's going to be as efficient as Lauri Markkanen at his age and his development curve, inside, drawing fouls, mid-range game, shooting from three, you can build around that, and you're not you can win games and then work for that number one alpha option, or try to do what the Jazz have done in previous years of try to build more of an egalitarian style team with premier role players at certain positions. Like, take everyone in the Jazz now and bump them up a level, right? Like, can you draft guys with the Rudy Gobert picks or the Donovan Mitchell picks over 5-6 years that can complement Lauri Markkanen, where Markkanen might be the top scorer on the team as a 26, 27, 28 point per game scorer, and you're complementing him with loads of 17, 18, 19 point per game scorers who can defend the rim a little bit better than Markkanen, who can facilitate a little bit better than Markkanen. Championship teams have been built with a player like Markkanen as the top scorer. You just are looking for different players who can facilitate. Look, man, 49 points. And it's easy for him. He tried going for 50 at the end. I don't think Kevin Porter Jr. appreciated it too much at the end. Will Hardy kept his starters in probably a minute too long. There was a dead ball opportunity to probably pull out all the starters, and he left them all in. I should say 4 starters and Ochai Agbaji. We'll get to him in a moment. Agbaji closed this game for the Jazz in place of Kelly Olynyk. But the last minute of the game, they tried to get Lowry 50. There was one pick and roll possession with about a minute and a half or about 2 minutes left in the game where Jordan Clarkson was initiating a pick and roll with Lowry, and Jordan Clarkson, he had a dunk. Like, he had just a wide open shot to the rim. At this point, Markkanen had like 43, I think it was. And on the Rockets call timeout with about 2 minutes left, and as Clarkson's walking to the bench, he's laughing, he's looking at Markkanen, and if you read his lips, he says, "Oh man, I'm sorry, you're trying to go for 50." So I guess they were trying to get him 50 at the end. Markkanen does get a 3-point attempt at the end of the game that did not go in, but the game was well out of hand, and Kevin Porter in a dunk on the other end with like 12 seconds left or 5 seconds left, he makes sure to kick his legs up a little far at Lauri Markkanen's face. So I don't think that was appreciated by the Rockets too much. So Markkanen, 49 points, 8 rebounds. I thought his defense was actually just as good as this vanilla porter I'm drinking. It's a C- defense. You're always going to get average defense out of Lauri Markkanen. Remember, we have a lot of overachievers usually who attend these postcasts who are used to hearing a C grade and thinking that's bad. Like, C is average. That's how we work on these things. And so Lauri Markkanen, he defended in space against ball handlers pretty well. Jalen Green performed well against Lauri Markkanen, but I thought that Markkanen defended against Kevin Porter pretty well. And whenever a player puts it on the deck against Markkanen never looks. He's a lot better than his complexion would indicate, right? He's not a stiff white guy. He moves laterally pretty well. I think Markkanen's best skill defensively against ball handlers is keeping his he always puts his off ball arm down, but he never nudges with his elbow. I'm kind of moving my elbow off screen here a little bit. But he keeps his offhand up, and he's so long that's actually like a very difficult thing as you're a ball handler to kind of think like, okay, am I going to try to score around this, right? And you do have to kind of move past Markkanen fully or almost fully to make that a very competent shot attempt. So his defense against ball handlers, if he can keep them from completely blowing by him, is always going to be kind of okay. So I thought it was definitely that today. And I've always been a fan of, if your perimeter defenders cannot defend the ball handlers, right? What difference does it make? Just put your big guys guarding him, right? Put your Vanderbilts out there. Put your Walker Kesslers out there. Put your Lauri Markkanens. Put your Kelly Olynyks out there. Because especially for young ball handlers who aren't used to exactly how to beat these guys, all these young ball handlers can get by these taller defenders. We saw it with Dante Exum all the time. They can get by these players with ease. And it's how they finish, right? And sometimes if you know you have a 7-footer that you've blown past in your shadow, it can be very daunting, or at least change the way you're thinking about finishing around the rim. You might not feel like you can do the near side rim off the backboard layup. You might feel like you have to go further under the rim and make a more difficult, not quite reverse layup, but under the basket type of layup. And those sometimes miss, even if they're wide open. They're not quite blow-by layups. De'Aaron Fox, a much more veteran ball handler, had no problem blowing by any sort of taller player for the Jazz the other night. But today, I thought Lauri Markkanen defended well in space. And so that's an all-star, right? Right now, the odds for most improved player are in favor of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is having, I think Jazz fans are really underrating how incredible of a season he's having. He was very good last year. He might have been deserving of an all-star nod last year. He is all NBA level this year. He is truly outstanding for the Thunder this year. But the narrative is shifting in Markkanen's direction. Right now, the odds, he's tied in third for odds with Tyrese Halliburton, who Halliburton's also having a drastically improved season for the Pacers, but he won't sniff an All-Star game, and you just very rarely have a Most Improved Player award go to a player who does not make the All-Star game. So this is now a two-man race between Lauri Markkanen and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and if the Thunder aren't in playoff contention come February or March, he's going to have some mysterious injuries that shut him down, and I don't think the Jazz are really going to operate that way, right? I mean, this is a new management regime, new coach. We don't really know much about Lauri Markkanen, but and his desire to play and through an obvious non-playoff season. But it seems like the Jazz are willing to fight for 40 wins and get the 10th play-in spot. So Markkanen could be playing until the 74th, 75th game. And yeah, that's deserving of a most improved player spot. This also tends to skew towards playoff contention teams. I think it would be, I'd have to look at the winners in previous years, but I think it would be pretty unusual for a most improved player to go to a non-playoff team. And I'm not suggesting that Lauri Markkanen won't get the award if the Jazz don't make the playoffs, but among Halliburton, Gilgeous-Alexander, and Lauri Markkanen, if Markkanen is the closest one to the playoffs, I think that really does help his narrative. The other side of it is Desmond Bane hasn't played in quite a while due to injury. I think if Desmond Bane comes on strong in the end of the season, he will also be a competitor for that award. So, long story short, Lauri Markkanen was absolutely great today. Steven in chat says, I get a hangover thinking about law school. Man, so I turned 21 in law school. I was a young kid when I started law school, and I turned 21 in November, so right before, a couple weeks before finals, and that was a good kicking off party for my law school finals to celebrate my 21st birthday. I actually had a great time. Turned around, did pretty well after that. But law school was a good time, and yeah, definitely a few 40s consumed in law school for me, but it was a good time and fond memories of Yangling Porters. And he says it's good beer. This vanilla porter, people can't acquire fancy beers. Yeah, part of the reason I like doing the beer part of it is because I know we got a lot of folks in Utah who they're kind of learning about beer, and I like to kind of suggest some interesting stuff that you can get outside of things. I think the weird craft beer market is like in its infancy in Utah, and I'd love to see what happens after that. And yeah, Steven, I was not sure you were an attorney. So it's cool to learn that we can share some law school horror stories along the way. Andy says you'll get an NBA award vote this year from the Utah market. So this is an interesting conversation as far as voting is concerned. It takes me by surprise literally every year when I look through the award voting, who gets votes. And it's people with like radio broadcasts in countries that I wasn't sure like the NBA gave votes to. So the idea of who gets these types of awards is given by people who I really don't think have as much of a pulse on the NBA as even like we have some pretty good national writers now for the NBA, not even just like bloggers and stuff. Like we all miss the heyday of 2009 basketball blogging, right? And how many different niche people were really writing about the NBA, having a great time with that. But we do have a lot of great national writers now who have a really good pulse on the NBA, and I really respect their opinions. I mean, even folks like Kendrick Perkins, who kind of he's a total clown on television the way he talks about some of his basketball opinions, but his award votes at the end of the day are tend to be pretty in line with the folks that he spends his time around, like Zach Lowe and such. So, but it's 80%, not maybe 85, 90% of voters are not that. They're play-by-play voters, play-by-play broadcasters for literally every team, or color commentators for literally every team. You get, obviously, Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson is, we rail on him on Twitter or elsewhere, and if you talk to anyone who likes talking basketball, everyone hates Mark Jackson. There is a significant amount, probably the majority of the population, likes listening to Mark Jackson, right? Like, he is a good kind of tone for broadcasting, and I think a lot of people do carry his opinion, including other casual voters. So, like eligible voters who might be more casual followers of the NBA, who don't have that nitty-gritty opinion on things. So, most improved player is strictly narrative. It's going to be strictly narrative. I don't think it's worth getting into arguments over who deserves it over whom. I don't think that argument carries weight, except maybe around the fringes. I think it's good. Like, okay, if you're talking among other, quote unquote smart basketball followers, you might be able to have a discussion with them and argue SGA versus Markkanen for most improved player, or Desmond Bane if it comes to it, and change their mind on their first or second place vote, or their third place vote. But when it comes to how 80% of the voters are going to vote come May, June, I think the vote's in May, it's going to be way more like, okay, who's been on TV? Who are people talking about, right? Like, who did Mark Jackson mention on a like, let's say Mark Jackson is doing an ESPN broadcast where there's a blowout. Like, tonight we got the TNT broadcast where the Nuggets completely blew the doors off the Clippers, and it was a 50-point game in the third quarter. I almost went to that game tonight, by the way. I live in Denver. I almost went to that game. Glad I didn't. So, like, who is Mark Jackson talking about in the most improved player conversation? Who is he mentioning as like, oh yeah, is Lauri Markkanen coming out of his coming out of his voice, right? Andy always coming through with the statistics says that we get 100 voters total. And this is for the benefit on Twitter Spaces. We get Andy Larson in the YouTube chat helping us out with the specifics on my pontification about the voting population of NBA voting. We get 100 NBA media voters total. That probably means, and if you break it down to the teams, that means you get the 30 national writers, right? Or the 30 broadcasters, one from probably each team, 30 local beat writers, one from each team, and there's 10 international voters. You usually see one from Spain, you usually see one from, I think I saw one from Argentina. You definitely get one from Mexico. And you get 30 national writers. So it's 100 NBA media voters total. And I would say out of the 30 national writers, right, you're talking about the 30 national media members. Andy says writers, but when I think about who's voting, I think the national members go everywhere from writers such as Zach Lowe to TV personalities such as Mark Jackson, right? I do think that the broadcasters who vote definitely can be a lot more team specific. I think you see the color commentators for pretty much most teams, if not every team, get a vote for that. So obviously I'd have to pull up the PDFs of the voting thing. Look, right now I've already explained it's a two-man race that I think between Markkanen and SGA. The odds say Halliburton's in it. I think as soon as the All-Star game voting passes, Halliburton won't be in contention for that. Obviously Markkanen needs to make the All-Star game, right? Like, that's also a thing. We got a few weeks to go before the coaches have to make their decisions for the All-Star game. The 49-point performance today really helps that to get him an All-Star vote. But it is a little tricky for who is actually going to be getting those votes. Coming down to it for the coaches' selections for the All-Star game. So hopefully Markkanen continues that today. Good win against a poor Houston Rockets team today. I want to quickly talk about Ochai Agbaji today. And Ochai Agbaji was He got minutes as prefaced by Coach Will Hardy in after last game when Agbaji got on the floor for just a couple minutes last game. He played today. There's going to be a lot of flowers given to him for what looks like a good stat line, and I'm not going to take it away from him, right? Like, I just like to nitpick some of these things around the edges because I think a lot of people freak out about why isn't he playing over Rudy Gay. I thought that when you look at the minutes distribution today, it was pretty interesting who he's getting minutes over, right? So it looks to me like Rudy Gay did not have any minutes taken away, right? So Agbaji did not play over Rudy Gay today. He played plenty with Rudy Gay today. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a DNP coach's decision today, so obviously he gets minutes taken away. But who else gets 60 minutes? Talen Horton-Tucker. Long-lost player, Talen Horton-Tucker gets in the action. So as I'm looking at it, yes, Kelly Olynyk was in foul trouble with 5 fouls, but Will Hardy is not, unless he needs Olynyk at the end of the game, he's pretty liberal with leaving Olynyk out there with fouls this season because he has different options to use. And so with Jared Vanderbilt at 30 minutes and Jordan Clarkson at 32 minutes, I think that Ochai Agbaji was really getting those minutes from Kelly Olynyk and Jordan Clarkson today because you had Horton-Tucker playing 16 minutes, you had Rudy Gay playing 16 minutes, and as usual, the Walker Kessler Jared Vanderbilt split was matched up to exactly 48 minutes, so it wasn't from either of those two. Those two spelled each other. Malik Beasley playing only 20 minutes today. I think he was also a big detriment to that. So I don't think, because of so many different players getting fewer minutes between Olynyk with foul trouble, maybe that was part of his 21 minutes, but I do think that you saw Agbaji in Olynyk's place in a lot of these lineups, including at the very end of the game, the last 5 minutes of the game, it was Agbaji in place of Olynyk, and Olynyk had 5 fouls, he wasn't fouled out at the point, and Olynyk had a miserable game up to that point. 1 of 6 from the field, 0 of 3 from 3, a turnover. I mentioned the 5 fouls. Olynyk's always going to be pretty good at distributing the ball, but he had a couple weird, wild shot attempts, and he could not keep Alperen Şengün off of the offensive glass when he was in. So it's like, all right, if Olynyk can't do what Olynyk does, I think Agbaji got the benefit of those minutes. I think Malik Beasley's defense over the past few games has made it so, like, look, we appreciate your three-point gunning, and I think we've seen Beasley's defense be better in the past. So maybe this was a little bit of a shot across the bow to Beasley to say, like, look, love your gunning, love your shooting. He's one of the best shooters in the NBA, if not, maybe top 5 this year in shooting. As far as like threats from 3, a lot of great contested threes for him today. 5 of 11 from 3 for him today. So Agbaji, I don't know who his minutes really took over. But his threes, 3 or 4 from 3 today, they were all right corner threes, right? I can't give him flowers for the 3-point shooting yet. He's definitely not Jared Vanderbilt from 3, but until he has a wider distribution of threats from 3 like we see from Malik Beasley, even if he doesn't shoot as high a percentage or he shoots those contested looks, it's largely just him in the corner getting the ball and hitting open corner threes. The third one that he made was a little bit more contested, and it was a nice look. And his one miss was a wide open look from the top of the arc that just barely went in and out. So it was a good shooting performance from him today, but it wasn't like, oh wow, he's really got his stroke going. So look forward to Agbaji playing well over the next few games. He could not defend Jalen Green today. Jalen Green blew by him a number of times. He did have a good offensive rebound that led to a Walker Kessler dunk that was appreciated. He did have one good defensive possession against Jalen Green that led to Jalen Green kind of dribbling it off his leg, and then it kind of got passed around the horn to a Houston miss. So we had one pretty okay defensive possession against Jalen Green, but he looked pretty flat-footed against Jalen Green a couple of times and fouled him a couple times. 4 fouls in 17 minutes for Agbaji today. So I'm encouraged. I like seeing him out there. I agree that he's probably a better option than some of the other 8th, 9th, 10th guys that the Jazz have out there. I'm not seeing the first round potential yet, right? So excited to see what happens from him. We're definitely going to be hearing about him in the papers tomorrow or wherever you get your Utah Jazz stuff. Like, Bauchi had 11 points. He was a +8. But kind of just seeing just a guy out there so far. So we'll see what happens there. I'm trying to think about what else we can mention real quickly before we should sign off, because I've been talking a lot about awards and Lauri Markkanen and such. Always appreciate the comments and questions that we get. Thank you, Andy, for joining YouTube for the first time. This has been a treat for me. Want to quickly mention Jared Vanderbilt. Weird defensive game from him again today, but when he leads the break, good things happen. So when he was on the plus side of getting those steals from a Houston team that just always passes the ball around the gym, this is not a good Houston team, guys. Vanderbilt makes good decisions on the break. It's definitely one of the skills that I have moved him up to. Like, all right, that's a B-level skill for him. Is like, if he gets the ball on the break, I'm pretty encouraged about what's going to happen. Look, he had one really bizarre behind the back pass trying to hit Jordan Clarkson in the corner that went wildly out of bounds and actually ended up being just an offensive foul because he trucked the Houston defender. But in the first quarter, he had a behind-the-back pass that was right on the money to Lauri Markkanen for a dunk. So he had 5 assists today. I think 4 of them came on the fast break. Hasn't changed my opinion on him. He's just a guy with some weird skill sets. I think that'll be something I might write about pretty soon. Is the Jazz are full of a lot of players who just are pretty weird and disparate in what their skill sets are. So, and they kind of make some like the early chaos lineups were fun, but then sort of like when you need to actually just like execute just normal ass plays, it can be a little difficult because you got a Jared Vanderbilt out there, you got a Talen Horton-Tucker out there, you got a Rudy Gay who can't shoot, you got Kelly Olynyk who can't rebound, like that sort of thing. This Houston team, I think this will be my final point, is like this Houston team, when these players get better, will be the exact type of team like the Kings are that will exploit this type of Jazz team very problematically. Fast guards and Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., who have great dribble moves, who can shake their defender off very quickly, and they can get to the rim. A center in Alperen Sengun, who is just a fabulous rebounder and a pretty solid dive threat. He's learning how to be a better pick-and-roll dive threat without just immediately stopping the ball and passing. He's learning how to be a pick-and-roll finisher. But he's a very competent offensive center, and he gets 8 offensive rebounds today. We've seen issues with just guys as basic as Jonas Valanciunas before, and I think you just see some turnovers, some shooting. Like Kevin Porter and Jalen Green combined for 16 of 46 from the field. It's only about 35%. Like, they obviously didn't shoot very well, but they are the kind of guys that can really hurt the Jazz. Jalen Green, 10 of 11 from the free throw line today. I think that's a lot of exploiting the Jazz issues there. So we'll see what happens from there. I sometimes I like to go through every player on the lineup. I do think it was interesting that Horton-Tucker got 16 minutes today. I did not like he basically played backup point guard for Mike Conley today. Mike Conley, 32 minutes. Talen Horton-Tucker, 16 minutes. There's your 48 minutes. So Horton-Tucker pretty much played the backup point guard role in lieu of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, while Colin Sexton is obviously out with the hamstring injury. And I thought he had some good like pick and roll ball handling possessions, but he had 2 fouls. His 1 turnover was just super weird. He is a complete non-threat from 3. And finally, we ran into a defense that treated him like a non-threat from 3. So interesting to see him out there. I think I'm not the biggest Keel fan, but I am less of a Horton-Tucker fan. So I thought it was weird to see Keel get the early pull from the lineup there. But this is a story about Lauri Markkanen today. 49 points, obviously a career high for him, and 8 rebounds, pretty solid defense. This guy's on the all-star train, definitely on the most improved player train, and he just seems like a joy to watch and a joy to enjoy. So this has been Mark Pereira for Salt City Hoops. I hope you've enjoyed today's broadcast of the live postcast and beer. I'm going to enjoy my C- vanilla porter now. Enjoy the rest of it. Y'all have a great night, and I can't wait to talk to you for the next game. Have a good one.